Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is DeVader, and we're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games they come from, without getting bogged down in music theory. And today's game is 1992's Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, the spin-off title of the influential RPG franchise that lowered the complexity and difficulty in order to try and broaden the appeal of the genre to Western audiences. That's right, it's just me. If you're watching the video version, you might notice there's also no face cam. Sorry. Look, it's been a day, alright? It's been a day and a half in terms of energy levels and everything. You have no idea how long it took me to even finish the research for this episode, but by God, I did it. Peter has to take some personal time, just didn't really have time to research and record a podcast this week. Hopefully, we'll be both back next week. That seems to be like it's going to be the case, but we shall see, obviously. But for now, you're stuck with me. Ha ha. And once again, as seems to be the pattern forever, I'm talking about a game I have not played. I'm pretty sure if I went back in the episode tracker and looked at all of my solo episodes, about 90% of them would be games that I haven't personally played. And I don't know what that says about me, but this is certainly a very good one to talk about, because I reckon a lot of people listening maybe don't even know that this game exists. So, yeah, we'll get into that, but first, what have I been playing? Well, I didn't finish. I rolled credits on Slay the Princess, which is a game I've mentioned a couple of times for the past couple of weeks. It is a visual novel, fully voiced. One of the voices is a man by the name of Jonathan Sims, who does the main character for a horror podcast called The Magnus Archives, which I had already listened to before he had even been announced to be involved in this game. He has such a good voice. He does such a good job. And I meant to look up who voices the princess, but she is also absolutely killing it. They both have to do multiple types of voices for their character, essentially. And they do such a good job. And the idea of Slay the Princess is, like I said last week, you're on a path in the woods. At the end of that path, there's a cabin. In the basement of that cabin, there's a princess. You are here to slay her. If you do not, it will mean the end of the world. And you have to decide, are you going to kill this princess that's chained to the wall? Or are you maybe going to not do that? And it is this really interesting sort of nested, not really time loop thing. I don't really know how to explain it. And I don't want to explain what the other shoe drop is in general. But I'll talk about the one thing that was in the demo, because then I don't really consider that a spoiler. So the easiest sort of track to get on is you go there and you try to kill her. And she beats the ever-loving crap out of you, and you die, and probably kill her in the process as well, though, so you both die. And then you wake up and you're back on the path in the woods, and the narrator's telling you everything again. But you remember what happened, and when you get back into the cabin looks different now, and when you get down to the basement, the princess is transformed into this more buff, devil, demon-like form, and she's known as the adversary. That's the type of princess she is, and basically you have to deal with that different form now, and she also remembers that you killed her before. And it's just really, really cool. I genuinely recommend this game to almost everybody, though be aware there is some gore in certain tracks. Not all of them, but one of the first things you see in this game is, if you're going for the not killing them route, the princess try to chew her own hand off. Yeah, it's that kind of game. But it's really, really good. I have seen 2 endings, but I only got one, and the one ending I got, I was so absolutely satisfied with that I'm good. I might go back to it eventually, but this ending, I was so happy with how my ending went that for now, I am extremely satisfied, and I don't think I have ever had that for a visual novel. Like, Slay the Princess might be among my top 5 games of the year this year. It's fantastic. Definitely go look it up. I know spooky season's over. Trust me, the candy canes I was able to buy at the grocery store like 3 days ago have already informed me of this. But, you should play it still. Anyways, enough about princesses and slaying them. I assume you save a princess in this game. It would match the general overall vibe that it's giving off, which is how generic can we make a fantasy game? This is Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, which released for the Super Nintendo on October 5th, 1992 in North America. And then Japan would see it released as Final Fantasy USA Mystic Quest on September 10th, 1993. And then it would release in Europe in October of 1993 under the title Mystic Quest Legend, which was a change made to keep it from being confused with the Game Boy title Final Fantasy Adventure, which had been released in Europe under the title Mystic Quest. Speaking of, this is apparently the first console Final Fantasy to ever release in Europe. So that's interesting to know. It was developed and published by Square everywhere but in the PAL regions, where it was published by Nintendo. So what is Mystic Quest? It is a Final Fantasy spin-off that has been, for lack of a better phrase, this is the one that fits, watered down. At first glance, it kind of plays like the other games in the series at the time. It's a top-down world map. You got a battle system that's very similar to other games in the series, etc., etc. Enemies, you got level ups, you got all that stuff. So, what do I mean by watered down then? Well, first of all, the player does not have free roam of the open world like they do in past games. Instead, it is navigated through, like, a linear path on a map, is what I gathered and what it looked like. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just looked at it wrong. I don't know. That's what it seemed to me, though. Like a Mario level map. Like Mario World. Which, great start, actually. In some ways, though, overworld traversal actually seems more like Zelda. There are dungeons where you can use, like, stuff to get through it. Like, you can use your weapons outside of battle, and you can do things like use your axe to chop down trees, or you can use bombs to bomb obstacles. There's even a grappling hook that gets you across gaps. Like, they just made Zelda. That being said, there are no save points, which were a mainstay of Final Fantasy at the time, and still are, I believe. I don't know if you can just... Peter would know better if you can just save whenever in Final Fantasy 16. But most Final Fantasies I have touched have needed save points. But this game does not. Instead, you can save whenever and wherever you want. And there are also no random encounters. Enemies are instead a still sprite on the overworld, and it seems like doing battle with them is completely optional. I mean, not really, because if you don't, you will die later on, probably, I assume. But you just walk past them. You have to, like, walk into them to actually start the fight. It doesn't use ATB, like other games at the time. Instead, it uses what Wikipedia refers to as a conditional turn-based combat system, which is basically... When I looked into it, it's just putting characters and enemies in a queue where the order's based on their speed. Basically, I think it is the same sort of system that Earthbound and Persona use. You also cannot manually decide what armor or weapons your characters have equipped. Once you get a better piece of equipment, it'll just automatically replace what you already have. So, no customization. You don't get spells by leveling up. You instead just earn them by completing certain objectives or defeating certain enemies. Items are really simplified. Potions apparently cure all status ailments alongside bringing back your health. So there's no, like, status recovery items at all. There aren't even spell upgrades. Cure was the example that Wikipedia used, which said, Cure always restores 25% of your max HP, regardless of what level you are. So, no Curaga in there either. And you can have the game control your party members. You can have an AI control your party members. If you're thinking, this does not sound like a Final Fantasy game, don't worry, you're not alone. Even the plot is kind of watered down and extremely generic, but that being said, it's also very similar to how Final Fantasy V's plot would turn out. See, you play as a young man named Benjamin, who at the start of the game is climbing the Hill of Destiny, just batting 1,000 on these location names. Benjamin's world is divided into 4 regions: Foresta, Aquaria, Fireburg, and Windia. Which are all home to 4 elemental crystals that uphold each region's prosperity. So there you go. The elemental crystals thing, still alive and well at this time, and would be for a while. But one day, a group of evil monsters known as the Vile Four stole these crystals and the world began to decay. But a prophecy says that when these Vile Four manage to divide the world by stealing the crystals, a knight will appear to vanquish them. And it turns out, Benjamin's that knight, according to an old man that he meets on the hill, apparently. So the question is just, can Benjamin stop the Vile Four and free the crystals from their evil grasp? And I guess anybody he picks up along the way? So what are my experiences with Final Fantasy Mystic Quest? Again, I've never played it. But why would I know that the soundtrack's really, really good? Well, because its music has been put in both Theatrhythm Curtain Call and Final Bar Line. And I don't think I played it in Curtain Call. I think it might have been DLC, but it is base game in Final Bar Line, and wow, I think it's the two of the battle themes. It might be a third track, I don't remember, but like the instant I played one of the songs, it was like, oh, I gotta do this game for the show. I knew of Mystic Quest's existence, but I had never seen gameplay. I just knew the cover art. And I knew that it was a version that was, very, very dumbed down. That is the extent of my knowledge when it comes to Final Fantasy Mystic Quest before this. But you might be asking yourself, why would they water down Final Fantasy? Well, the answer is the same as it is for all things. They wanted to try and appeal to audiences in the West more, because, see, RPGs were still a niche genre over here, console RPGs at the very least, especially compared to their status in Japan, where Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest basically owned the block. And this is a completely Japanese-developed game, but that was their goal. They wanted to pick up more fans in North America specifically. And up to this point, North America had seen 2 mainline Final Fantasies, being the original and then Final Fantasy IV, as well as several spin-offs, like games that would eventually be considered part of the Mana series, and games that in Japan are the Saga series, things like that. And it was apparently executives who claimed that making the game easier would appeal more to Westerners. This was not the first time they had apparently done this. I did not know this. They, I guess, also had tweaked and simplified FF4 for its North American release. I had never heard about that, but that's interesting. And essentially, the executives wanted them to go even further beyond that concept with Mystic Quest. So, the game was overall developed to be very similar to Final Fantasy Legend III, which is the third Saga game in Japan, recreating several mechanics and game feel aspects from it. They wanted it to be more fast-paced and action-oriented, as typically those were the kinds of games that sold well in North America at the time, which, not wrong, that's probably where the demographics were at that point. The translator of the game, according to Wikipedia, apparently said that Mystic Quest was one of the easiest games he had ever had to translate because it's so small, and if you are making an RPG, And that's something your translator can say. Something might have gone a little bit wrong. And it did go wrong because people didn't really like it. Not only did it not attract new players because they bounced off due to the watered down mechanics and the very generic story, but people who were already fans of Final Fantasy also bounced off of it because it was watered down and they had been hoping for something more like Final Fantasy IV, which is, I believe, still to this day, one of the more popular Final Fantasies. So, alas, their goal of bringing Final Fantasy into the mainstream success in North America would not actually be achieved until 5 whole years later with the release of Final Fantasy VII. When Mystic Quest released in Japan, basically got the same reception. Turns out that no matter what region you're in, watering down the Final Fantasy mechanics doesn't really appeal to new or veteran players, regardless of where you are. It is believed that the game did at least find some audience with younger players. So I guess there's that. It got that, I guess. I mean, even when the game re-released on the Wii Virtual Console, like, critics reviewed it and were like, yeah, this is way too handholdy and it's super easy and it's boring and generic. So it hasn't improved with time. But you want to take a guess at what no reviews have ever said anything bad about? In fact, it's generally pointed to as one of the better parts of the entire game. If you guessed the music, you were correct. And one of the composers, the main composer as far as I can tell, of Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is a man by the name of Ryuji Sasai. Sasai was born December 21st, 1961 in Osaka. He began doing music at age 15 by forming a band, and he joined a band called Novella in 1982. And during this time, he also did music for 2 animes that I'm not familiar with, being Mysterious Cities of Gold and Adventures of the Little Koala. For some reason, Adventures of the Little Koala sounds familiar, and it shouldn't, but it does. Anyways, Novella ended activities in 1984, and so he joined another band, Action, in 1988 to serve as the bass guitarist and backing vocalist. And it was during this time, in 1989, that he scored his first game. It was a game called Mugen no Shinzo 3, and then proceeded to send his demo tapes to every single software developer he could possibly find a listing for in PC gaming magazines and elsewhere, wherever you would have found job listings in 1989. And eventually he did get a response from the studio Micro Cabin. If you're wondering, hey, I don't recognize any of the names you've said in terms of games yet. Yeah, me too, buddy. But that's about to change, because when he was working on Mugen no Shinzo 3, he was working with a friend of his named Chihiro Fujioka, who in 1991 was hired by Square as a director, and through that, he invited Sasai to come join Square as well. And at this point, Square's only composers were Uematsu and Kenji Ito, so they were actively trying to find more, so that it was not just those 2 people scoring every game they were making. And he worked at Square until 1998, which is also the year that his band Action ended their activities. And also, he was meant to work on 2 RPG projects, but both of them fell through due to issues at Square. And so with no new assignment from the company, he left. And he doesn't appear to work in video games anymore. He has no credits listed anywhere after leaving Square outside of, like, compilation CDs released later by Square. Wikipedia says that he is currently a bass guitarist in a Queen tribute band called Queen Mania, and also a member of the rock band Spiders from Cabaret. It should be noted, though, the source for that information was an interview that was conducted in 2009, so it's been over a decade. That might not be true anymore. His preferred genres are heavy metal and alternative rock. You are going to hear that is true right away on this soundtrack. His favorite bands are Extreme, Judas Priest, and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. He also says that while he was working in games, he listened to a lot of film and classical music. So, widen your horizons, In terms of his discography, the first few games These are his micro cabin games, I guess. Xak, Xak, The Art of Visual Stage, Frey in Magical Adventure, Xak 2, I don't know, man. The Rising of the Red Moon. Stop starting your words with X. And then, after that would be when he joined Square, where he would do the music for Final Fantasy Legend 3, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, Treasure of the Rudras. He would do the character select theme for the fighting game Tobal No. 1, and he would do the soundtrack for Bushido Blade 2, which would be the last one that he would do in video games. And in terms of the Mystic Quest soundtrack itself, it was also composed by a man by the name of Yasuhiro Kawakami, and it is apparently among the first few titles to keep the Final Fantasy branding, but not have a soundtrack that was composed by Nobuo Uematsu. So Ryuji Sasai was one of the first people to touch a Final Fantasy soundtrack that was not Uematsu. So it's notable for that, I suppose, as well. And let's have a bit of a listen to this soundtrack, shall we? With our 5 critical tracks. And we're going to go ahead and start with critical track number 1. This is Battle 2. So this is the regular boss theme. That's right, I did not start with the main battle theme, because I like this one better, personally. It was composed by Ryuji Sasai, so, like I said, when he says that he's interested in rock, he ain't lying, and you can hear it in his work. This, crunchy sound that they get out of the SNES, you don't hear it very often on the SNES. Maybe in F-Zero? I don't know, but it's really, really damn good, and you can definitely hear a love for that genre in there. It doesn't sound like anything the series has had up to that point, at the very least. And I wonder how much of this was them saying, you know what Americans like? They like electric guitars. Make sure there's a lot of those. Maybe, I don't know. But this song is rad, that's what I do know. But to dial it down just a little bit, and by a little bit I mean by a lot, we're going to get into critical track number 2. This is Light Temple. I mean, come on, you can even hear how generic the whole thing is just based on the titles. Granted, this isn't actually that far away from what titles for regular Final Fantasy games were in terms of soundtracks, I guess. But Light Temple. I'm going to assume it plays in a light temple. I don't actually know. This is the only song on the list, actually, that I have that was composed by Yasuhiro Kawakami, so we did at least get one of his in there. And honestly, it sounds very serene, and I really like it. It feels nice. It also feels like it is a single vocal track away from either being the credits to a Ghibli film, or for some reason my brain says early 90s, mid 90s tragedy film. I don't know. Am I off base there? I'll let you be the judge. You can tell me on Twitter, I guess. I don't know. But this is a nice piece. It feels a lot different from pretty much everything else we are going to hear for the remainder of this episode. And I think that makes it stand out all the more. Anyways, we're done sounding nice. We're done sounding good. Aren't you tired of being nice? Don't you just want to go Mount Gale? Critical track number 3? I don't know what I'm saying. Critical track number 3 is called Mount Gale. This one was once again composed by Ryuji Sasai. It is also referred to on the internet as Mountain Range of Whirlwinds, which is a much better title, I'm not gonna lie. Mount Gale sounds like an area that probably exists in about 30 RPGs? Most of them probably from the PS2 era, to be fair, but not the most unique sounding name once again. That being said, the song itself, though, feels very similar to some of the stuff that would eventually make up the soundtrack to Final Fantasy VI. That's what it reminds me of the most. And obviously this game predates FF6 by a couple of years. So I find that extremely interesting, but also this just sounds like a really neat area song. And it stood out to me when I was listening. For critical track number 4, we're actually going to get into the end game now, starting with the final dungeon music. This is Doom Castle. Yeah, I'm going to stop harping on it after this, I promise. But again, the most generic titles the most generic area themes they possibly could have made. Doom Castle? Really? Anyways, whatever. This was composed by Ryuji Sasai, and hot damn, I really, really like this theme for the final dungeon. It might feel a little bit busy for the final dungeon for me, for a dungeon theme, but it sounds epic enough to be the finale. And I think that, like, guitar piece that you hear in the clip alongside, I've always, like, in my head translated that one synth, you know the one, as violins? That's what I think they are. You might think differently, but they work really, really well together, is the point I'm trying to make. This song rocks incredibly hard. And this is such a good final dungeon theme. It is awesome. But of course, at the end of a final dungeon, there is always a final boss. And the music that plays during that final boss is actually critical track number 5. This is Battle 3. Again, composed by Ryuji Sasai. I genuinely actually don't really know what to say that I haven't already said about every single track before this. This song rocks incredibly hard. I kind of want to hear this performed by like an orchestra and a like guitarist. I think it would be awesome. This song sounds like it would be super rad on real instruments, and that probably exists somewhere. I'm gonna have to dig to find it, but oh man, just fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Genuinely don't really have anything else to say about it. And now for tracks on the cutting room floor, as usual, I got 2. And we're actually going to start by giving the main battle theme its due attention, because it still deserves some. This is Battle 1. If you couldn't guess, based on all the, electric guitar in there, this was composed by Ryuji Sasai. In fact, both of these were. I'm just going to say that so I don't have to keep saying it. This is the main battle theme of the game, like I said. And in my opinion, it's the least impressive of the 3. But when I say that, I am not saying it is bad, and I am not saying it is not impressive, because this song is still rad. It barely missed being on this critical 5. If it was a critical 6, this song would be on there 100%. It does, in certain parts, sound like it would fit more in like a side-scrolling Contra-style shooter or something like that, but otherwise, like, this song sounds rad. An entirely different feel from like stuff like Final Fantasy VI that would come later. And I think it nails it. I think this is really, really good. Again, I feel like a lot of this soundtrack came out of them saying, Americans like rock, make it rock. But in this one regard, they were correct. So, yeah. And my other track on the cutting room floor, this is another area song. This is Lava Dome. So far be it from me to assume where these songs play in the game, but I'm going to assume this plays in the Fire Dungeon, because it's called Lava Dome, and it comes right after the song that is the City of Fire theme. Just using my context clues here. It just caught my ear when listening through. Like, it's just more good SNES rock. I don't know what else to say. The whole soundtrack's full of stuff like this, and it's really, really good. And I'm glad that I got to talk about it on this show. I'm glad that Theatrhythm, like, pointed out to me that these songs exist. Because otherwise, I'm not 100% certain I would have ever talked about this game. So what will I never forget about Mystic Quest? It's this music. This music is so good. I'm never going to play it. It sounds really boring. It sounds incredibly boring. I get the idea that they were trying to make Baby's first Final Fantasy to like ease people in. But historically, and granted they might not have had as much historical precedent before this. This was the SNES era, not like, you know, now. But historically, dumbing your game down to appeal to a new audience just makes it not appeal to a new audience, and also makes it not appeal to the existing audience. And so you lose on both counts. I don't think I've ever seen any instance where that is not how it goes. So, a lesson to be learned, everybody, remember. And that'll do it for this episode of Original Sound Chat. You can find me on Twitter at StringPixel. You can find Peter at Pete Speakeasy. Find the video version of Original Sound Chat over at the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel. And you can find the podcast feed and the audio-only version over at anondino.squarespace.com, where you can also find it on various podcatchers, whether it be the soon again to be discontinued Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, which has stayed the same since we started the show, say what you will about Apple, or Spotify, which not only do we have the show feed on Spotify where you can hear all the episodes and listen to all the fun trivia that we drop on you. We also have a playlist where if we talk about a song and it is on Spotify, then it goes on this massive, massive playlist. I have not yet checked how long it has gotten. I usually wait until the anniversary episode in January to do that. So be ready for that, I guess. But Mystic Quest is not on Spotify, unfortunately. Very, very unfortunately. There are most Final Fantasies, pretty much all of the mainline Final Fantasies, except for 16, are on Spotify. 16 will be on there eventually, I'm sure. It's just going to take like a year and a half, like Remake did. But yeah, Mystic Quest, a lot of the spin-offs, not so lucky. Hopefully one day they change that, but who knows. And once you're done listening to the show, you can find us on social media at Soundchat OST, and there you can send us feedback, suggestions. There's a couple of like listener suggestions that I'm getting to personally in the next couple weeks. So if you have a game that you think we should talk about, you should tweet at us and say, hey, talk about this game. And also, with the release of this episode, It's time to start getting ready for the Thanksgiving Q&A, usually every year around the Thanksgiving time, American Thanksgiving specifically. Peter and I do a very easy, very laid back, a lot shorter Q&A episode just to make it so that we don't have to do a bunch of research and then record a 2-hour show the week of a holiday. It just helps. And we're going to start needing your questions once again. We didn't do one last year because it happened to fall on our 200th episode. Like our 200th episode landed exactly on the week when we would have done this. So it's been a little while, and I hope I still remember how to do it. So if you've got questions to ask us, you can post them publicly or you can DM them to us at Soundchat OST on Twitter. And we will answer them, probably, statistically. Please send us questions. Next week, I will be talking about Masaki Kurokawa, and Peter will be talking about Hidenori Suzuki. Now, to play us out, can you believe that I found a lot of metal covers of the music in this game? Go figure, right? Including one by Game Metal, which I almost used, but we used a Game Metal theme for the transition a couple weeks ago for Silent Hill 4, so I kind of figured maybe let's do somebody else. And I found a metal cover of Battle 2 by YouTuber Vincent Moretto, and it's featuring Daniel Tidwell. And remember when I said some of these songs sound really good when translated to real instruments? Hey, I was right, so please enjoy that. Thank you for listening to Original Soundchat. We will see you next week. Take care.